Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to Author Events and Censorship, a session that was presented at Winter Institute 2026 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
I am so excited to bring together this panel of three people who have dealt, unfortunately, with more than their share of navigating author censorship in their time. I will introduce everybody in a second. I'm going to go through some of the normal business stuff first. Just a reminder that the slides are going to be available. I would love it if you would, for the sake of myself and my fellow panelists, to rate us in the app on the survey. Just helps us improve and gauge what people are interested in terms of these education sessions. The audio recording will be available on BookWeb and on the podcast Booked. So if you find yourself thinking, someone said something, but I can't remember exactly what it was, it'll be there available. Please do silence your cell phones or we will mock you. And if you have questions, when we are going to have significant time for Q&A, because we just agreed as a group that it would probably be more effective that way. Please wait for the wireless mic to come to you before you start asking your question, for the sake of the recording and for access and audibility. Okay. And then the last thing I want to talk to you about, what you've all been waiting for, the antitrust guidelines. Booksellers are encouraged to share ideas. We love that, and support. We love that extra during the conference. But the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is our friend, prohibits us from discussing price or pricing policies, boycotts, dividing up the market. And for more information, you can see our full antitrust guidelines on BookWeb. Here's what we're going to talk about today. I want to say a little bit about the need for this session about author events and book censorship, and then I will introduce our wonderful panelists. We'll get into some of the predetermined questions to just help them kind of talk through their experiences, and we're going to leave half the session for Q&A. So first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Philomena Polifrone. I'm with the American Booksellers Association. I also have on my right Sophia Brecken from Elliott Bay Book Company. Immediately to my left, I have Angie Zhao from BBGB. And at the end, I have Shane Mullen from Left Bank Books. And each of these panelists does events in different contexts, some of the same contexts, so they're going to speak to different aspects of author events that you might experience. But just to say briefly why we're doing this, in the past few years, there's been an uptick of attempted or successful censorship of author events through various means. That can be cancellation of school visits by authors that bookstores are working with. Some of you are nodding. You've probably seen some of that in the news. It's been picked up by places like Book Riot and elsewhere. We've seen threats of violence, online harassment, and an attempt to intimidate people into canceling events. We've seen protests that happen at events, disruptions of those events. All of these, and I want to be really clear here, these are forms of censorship. That kind of intimidation, fear tactics, that is how people generally censor bookstores. Sometimes it's lawfare, sometimes it's the other things that we see impacting schools and libraries. But by and large, it is that attempt to make you think twice, make you feel you have no choice but to cancel an event. So the goal of this is to help share resources, share knowledge, and be prepared so that you have something available to you, so you have an option other than canceling. So that's why we're here. So I'm going to go through these questions, and panelists, I think for the first one, I'll just go from Sophia over to Shane, and then from there we can just kind of go free for all, okay? So let's start with this one. Sophia, can you just tell us about some of the kinds of events you do in your store and some of the challenges that you've had in terms specifically focused on censorship?
Yeah, so hi, I'm the events manager at Elliott Bay Book Company in Seattle. First of all, we are in Seattle, so we are very lucky to be in a very liberal bubble in the heart of the queer community, I will say. But we do about 400 events a year, so both in-store and off-site with partner venues and partner organizations. So that is a lot of events. So some of the pushback that we've seen, we've had about 5 or 6 events that we've had to cancel in the last, I don't know, like 9 months because the authors are Canadian, so they haven't been able to cross the border, which isn't necessarily book censorship, but in a way they are targeted academics and scholars, especially many of them who are queer scholars that have basically not been able to get the paperwork needed to cross the border for events. So that's kind of the most pertinent one that we've noticed, unfortunately, very consistently, and I think it's something that we're going to continue to see. But because we do host both fiction, nonfiction, we do everything. We see, mild protests at events all the time. We hosted an anti-Zionist Jewish author not too long ago, and the entire store was covered in graffiti in the morning when we got to the store, and like posters of claims that, about genocide and such. And the author luckily just kind of laughed it off because she was used to it, which was a huge plus. But we typically are very lucky that we don't get a lot of pushback with those more political events. But that is kind of the thing that we've noticed most, is that we will get, emails, complaints, even Instagram comments or things like that. We also had someone accuse us with that event of likening us to the KKK for hosting an anti-Zionist author, where we received about 500 emails in the course of 2 hours. So it's things like that, and it's luckily not at events, so customers and the authors themselves aren't as affected by it, which we are happy to, take the grunt if it means that it ends up being a successful event. And the goal is always to just be a community space for those tough political conversations and tough conversations about social justice that are extremely necessary. But yeah, so there's been a lot, unfortunately.
Thank you, Sophia. Angie, same question. What kind of events do you do and what kind of challenges?
Hi guys, I'm Angie. I'm the events and marketing manager at BBGB in Richmond, Virginia. We're a children's specialty bookstore, and so that means that a huge part of our model relies on our school author visits program, which is what I manage. And we leverage primarily publicity tours. If you guys, it seems like a lot of people are familiar with school author visits, so I won't get into the details there. You can come talk to me if you have more questions about publicity tours afterwards. But I am working with about 4 to 5 authors a month, trying to place them in at least 2 to 3 schools for the limited time that they're here with us. And the number one challenge that we have been running into the past few years, and more increasingly last semester and the previous semester, is the last minute cancellation of these author visits. It follows a very unfortunately recognizable pattern where it's incited by 1 or 2 or a handful of very vocal parents who bring up an issue last minute that they have with an author or their stories to the school administration, and they manage to dismantle the entire visit for the whole school. Obviously, this is a tragedy. Logistically, it's a nightmare. It ruins relationships with these schools. Obviously, these kids are missing out on these invaluable opportunities to hear from and see an author that they would otherwise not be able to. But I think the more sinister challenge that we've encountered is truly how quiet the censorship, how quietly it creates a ripple effect upwards. And so we find that out of fear of not wanting to relive the experience of having to pull back an author visit so last minute, and lose financially and emotionally, we're not pitching as much for events for titles that we know resonates with our audience, but we're instead looking at, is this something that could potentially cause a parent to have an issue down the line? Will it put us in a position, will it put the author and the publisher in a position where we have to scramble at the very last minute? And so that is it's hard to talk about. And I've been able to have conversations with several of you guys, several booksellers who are going through the same thing. And I think that that's probably the scariest part of this, is just how quietly the censorship will creep up the line in ways that we aren't even conscious of.
Thank you, Angie. Shane.
Hi, yes. I'm Shane Mullen. I'm the event coordinator at Left Bank Books in St. Louis, Missouri. I handle the adult side and anything public facing, but we do thankfully have someone who does our school visits. So thank goodness that's not me. We do about 200 events per year that are kind of our events. We actively seek out, as part of our mission, we are a queer-owned bookstore. So we are seeking out those underrepresented voices for our community. And it is difficult always, but it is something that we really do have as part of our mission. And some of the difficulty that we have experienced with that, we have had activists, we have had protests, we have had threats. One, as you were talking down there, I was like, oh yeah, there was that time when someone came through and just put a whole bunch of racist shit all over our store. Sorry, I will probably cuss because I'm very tired, and it's very hard to censor when I'm very tired. And also, we're not censoring here. But another time, we were doing an event, and we had hired a security team to do a couple of events for us, and had been very friendly with them, and they just showed up at an event for I forget the name of the book. But I was like, oh, it's so good to see you. And they're like, yes. And can we go talk to you over here? And I was like, oh my God. Because they had set up an alert for any time we were mentioned, and that event had been targeted. So they had sent someone undercover to attend the event without my knowledge. And then they showed up with and I know what they look like. And they were there just to make certain that we were okay. And that was maybe the more terrifying thing, because I felt very safe that they were there, but I also felt very safe that I was unaware of any of it. But we have been trolled. We have been, and we've had trans authors who have had concerns for coming to the state of Missouri. Missouri is not a friendly state in a lot of ways, but St. Louis is. And we have things that we as St. Louis and we as a bookstore can do to, that we have some laws that do provide safety and security, but it does take work, and it does take convincing to the publicists to be like, hey, no, we are a queer-owned bookstore. We are here living this life every day. Like, I know that from an outside perspective, it does seem like, yes, the laws are definitely scary, but we are doing our things to protect the authors. So that reassurance and trying to make certain that they know that we want to do these events and we will do them with our whole chest.
Thank you, Shane. So I want to move to the next question, because we've talked a little bit about what you've had to deal with, but I want to start thinking about what you've done to respond to that, because each of you have worked through this, have had experience needing to potentially pivot an event or change something at the last minute. Have there been cases where you've been able to do something other than cancel the event, and what were they? So whoever wants to go first.
I mean, I think I wouldn't say the easiest thing, but we've, I think, added security, especially to offsite events that are at larger theaters. We do offsites that are, up to thousands of people. So being able to add security and just having that extra layer to also show the attendees that, we're trying our best to make it a safe space. We are hesitant to add security to bookstore events because we are in Capitol Hill, which is the site of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone from the 2020 protests. So in general, the neighborhood and many customers of the bookstore are very anti-police and anti-security in that regard. So that's kind of like a constant battle in a way that we're facing is how can we provide security without, supporting police necessarily. But I think that's the main thing that we've been able to do, and just being upfront with authors when we've had issues of just like, hey, we're aware that this is a thing, but we are trying our best to make this as safe as possible. Like, how would you like to proceed? So luckily we haven't had to cancel any events outright because of it. But I think being able to pivot and just add that extra layer of security has been the main thing for us.
So with school visits, it's a bit tricky. The school is probably the major half of the partnership, and they're institutional. When there's one objection and they listen, then the entire school loses access to an author visit, and we lose that audience. And so we have not been in a position where we're necessarily able to pivot an event if an author is already there, or if an author is traveling or about to travel in for it. But I would say where we will then pivot our focus is on making sure that the relationships within this event are cared for. And so making sure that the publicist and the author are informed, as well as the families of the schools, who have many of whom have purchased and pre-ordered books that they're expecting to be signed by the author, or they're expecting to come accompanied with an author visit. And so we'll then pivot our focus to making sure that whatever questions they might have, we are answering to the best of our ability, and if we don't have information right from a school directly regarding why an author visit was canceled, even though we can absolutely speculate, then we will make that transparent to the families, and we will encourage them to reach out and ask their school about it. And I think really maintaining an attitude of supporting the author and understanding that they are, just as we are, just as devastated as they are, and just as confused as they are, is kind of where we will typically pivot our focus, instead of pivoting whatever the event becomes.
Yeah, so I'm hearing security, focusing on relationships and maintaining those relationships.
I am all about the pivot. So we had an event with a former cabinet member that was a part of a very established relationship with a university, a little bit of like for St. Louis, like the conservative university, which is not even. But we had a long relationship with them in a regular series. They heard that there were going to be some anti-labor, or I forget which side it was. Anyway, there were going to be protesters. They didn't want protesters. They told us that because they were having electrical issues, the event would no longer be able to happen on campus. We, in fact, entirely canceled the event series that we had been doing with them for years, because we knew that that was not the case. We knew exactly why they were canceling the event. And we pivoted the event to be a meet and greet in the store. So a large theater event, we then had to figure out how to put those people in the store, because we were aware of who the protesters were, and because we were not really prepared to add that on to an already probably pretty chaotic event. We did narrow down the people that were suspected of being the disruption, and because they wouldn't be able to have their moment, which is really what they wanted. They wanted to hold up their sign, they wanted to yell their piece, and then they were probably going to go, which we've dealt with way worse than that. So we were fine with that happening at the event, because yes, they deserved to have like a little bit of say against what some of the things that were her current policies. So we brought the event into the store. We did not invite those people to the event because, and this is also why we do RSVPs for all of our events. Especially, we do RSVP required for some of our bigger or some of our more politically sensitive events. A most recent event that we did with that was dealing with abortion, we required RSVP, and we actually checked people's RSVPs so that if anything did happen, we were pretty aware of who might be causing it. And that does especially because we know that St. Louis is in a blue bubble. So if we start to see people coming from like the outskirts, coming from St. Charles, we can be suspicious of like, hey, maybe we should keep an extra eye on. And especially if we start seeing a lot of people registering that are coming from out of the St. Louis area, then we can probably guess that maybe this event has been picked up by some people that are wanting to cause disruption. And then we have brought in security at the very last minute. We said, hey, this event is maybe getting a little bit to where we just want to be certain that our staff is safe, and beyond because a lot of the partnerships that we do with like the abortion groups, like they have their kind of security that goes to everything that they do. So that's really great. There are a lot of queer organizations that also really help us with like unofficial security, but people who are like trained in security. So it's not people that we are necessarily paying, but it is people inside the community that are going to protests, that are being very active in the community, that are then able to support and make certain that if something goes off the rails, that we do have that extra level.
And Shane, you started to get into this a little bit, and really all of you did, but what are some of the things that you would really recommend to another bookseller who is coming to you and saying, we're starting to feel this heat a little bit, or we want to get out ahead of it and be prepared? What are some action steps that you would recommend that people could do even before they have a problem, or perhaps maybe also in response when the problem comes up?
I mean, I think the main thing is tell your staff. Don't, have there be a level of transparency that everyone in the bookstore knows that this is happening. It shouldn't just be you or whoever is organizing the event shouldn't have to, deal with it and then not tell everyone. It needs to be something that everyone is involved with. And I think that's what helps, that's what keeps the community together, is just the transparency of it. Like, this is the world we live in. Yes, it's shit sometimes, but we can do it if we do it together. That's kind of the sentimental thing that I'll get into. But I think that's the main thing that I think has helped a lot, is just if all the staff knows, whether it's offsite, whether it's in store, then it's also helpful to brainstorm ideas. If you can't think of ways to make events safer, maybe other booksellers will know, or the managers. So yeah, I just think transparency within the staff has been a huge, huge thing. So.
Yeah, I obviously responding to a cancellation or a moment of censorship in the moment is one thing, but I think the biggest takeaway from the past few semesters for me has been that preparation will keep the staff and myself steady when the pressure and if the pressure comes. I think the most concrete thing that we've sort of implemented just this past fall semester has been an event agreement form that we require schools to sign at the outset of confirming each author visit. This outlines not just the logistical sort of expectations and partnership between the bookstore and the school, the services and the bookselling services, and the book purchase minimums that we expect, and then also the services that we provide to the school for the author visit. But it also just creates some level of accountability between both parties. This is, by the way, not a legally binding contract, but I think that having something written, having your expectations outlined, has created a difference in that schools are seeing this ahead of time and can make a decision months before a visit is going to happen. And so it has prevented, I would say, a good deal of any cancellations thus far. And so I think just in a broader sense, having, like Sophia said, having conversations with your staff about what to expect, what the protocol is when it comes down to a visit or an author or a story being challenged. I would say, if you haven't already, I know a lot of you guys have professionalized your events infrastructure. It took, I would say, our store quite a bit of time before we finally knew that we had to take that seriously. And yeah, put expectations in writing that you have with event partners, clarify any like channels of communication should an emergency like a cancellation come up. I think that the more structure that you have in place before there is pressure, the more steady you will be.
And Angie has generously agreed to make that agreement that they use public, or well, not public, to share it with you all. Sorry, just get it out there. No, to make that available to other booksellers, so we can make that available to you if you want to see it.
It is part of my event planning that I do have a conversation with, especially with some of the more sensitive topics that we will host with our offsite events or offsite venues. I will make certain that they know that their staff, that we are the ones that are, so if they are not security, if they are just doing tickets or check-in or whatever the case might be, that we are the ones that make the call. Like, they are not the ones that are allowed to bounce people. Like, so whatever their feelings are towards the topic are not at issue. We want our event attendees to be there and comfortable and aware. Part of the awareness is also making certain that like exits are, especially for the staff and for the attendees. But I'm in love with the security team. He's so tall and so gorgeous. But one of the events that we Chaston Buttigieg, and we were asked to bring in security, obviously. And they asked me a question, and I was like, what does that mean? And basically, they were asking me, so if we do have a security threat, are we locking him in this room, or are we getting him out of the building? These are our like best options in this space. What do you want me to do? And I was like, isn't that why I'm paying you? Like, I don't want to make this decision, but I did. I had to make the decision of like, okay, like in this circumstance, yes, like we would want him to leave. In this circumstance, no, we would want him to be locked up in the green room, which is wild. Like, I was like, oh, this is the life I live right now. But having those conversations with the venue, making certain that they have kind of established protocols of what their staff needs to do in any type of emergency situation, any type, because we get tornadoes too in the Midwest. So we have to deal with that on top of all this other shit we're dealing with. So making certain that people really know on your staff in the venue, having those conversations early rather than later, so that if you do have to pivot and take the event somewhere else because they are not being supportive enough. Yep.
Can I add something? I just missed mentioning like probably the most pertinent detail in our event agreement form with schools, which is that we clearly state a cancellation policy, which schools have to sign, detailing that if they cancel the visit within 30 days of the visit date, then they're still required to meet the book purchase minimum. And this has, I think, not only has this allowed schools to not be so casual, right, in agreeing to author visits, which is a good thing on our end, that they're taking it more seriously, but it just gives us some level of protection if the event were to be canceled, right? The time and investment and labor that we've already put into a visit doesn't go completely to waste. And it gives us a little bit of wiggle room to pivot to potentially find another host school if it comes down to it. So putting a cancellation policy, do not be afraid.
Do any of you three have anything else that you're hoping to share that we haven't gotten to yet before we start to transition into questions and bringing some of our other guests in? Okay, great. So before we fully open it up into questions, there are a couple of people who have given me permission to kind of invite them into the conversation because they've dealt with similar things that I've spoken to them about. Heather, Heather in the back there. Do you want to just say a little bit about your recent author visit cancellation and sort of what you're looking at going forward?
Sure. So about 2 weeks ago, I should say we're a children's bookstore, and we do a ton of school author visits. We've been open for 36 years. And about 2 weeks ago, this was the first time this ever happened, a school called and said that they had a parent call and complain. An author was going to be visiting. This author was visiting kindergarten and first grade with a picture book that they wrote. A parent went on to the author's website and saw that the author had written some books for older kids, YA books that had some queer characters. And the parent was vocal and disgruntled and gathering some other parents, and the school didn't want to have the visit. The librarian was horrified and embarrassed. This was made from the principal. So I immediately called ABFE, and then I called PEN America, and I was like absolutely livid, and I saw red. And after I took a deep breath, I called the principal, and we had a conversation. And it turned out that what he really wanted to do was not cancel the visit. He really wanted to postpone the visit so that he could put in place some kind of protocol, something that would allow parents to let their kids opt out, like kids do with testing these days, or the Pledge of Allegiance, or anything else that gives parents control over their child, but nobody else's. But in order to make that policy, he needed time. So he said, can we just reschedule? And I said, well, the author's on tour right now. As you know, you can't reschedule that easily. I said, but you could always bring him in for an honorarium visit next month if you want to. And that is, in fact, what they are doing. But it made me realize that I was sort of ready to, for lack of a better way of saying it, tear this guy a big one. But then I stopped and really talked to him and realized, okay, maybe this is what we need to, when we're working with schools, make sure they have before I decide I'm going to work with a school. So now our author school team asks every school that we're going to put an author in, do you have a program, a protocol in place so that if there is a disgruntled parent, it doesn't get to the author, it doesn't cancel the visit, it doesn't get to the teachers, it doesn't get anybody else involved, it doesn't have to go any further. That parent and their child can be dealt with in a very specific way that is all, written up, that there are guidelines, and therefore we will still continue to do business with your school as long as this is in place. So we're sort of turning it a little bit and telling schools, you need to have this to protect our authors and your teachers if we're going to provide you with author visits.
Thank you, Heather. And Michael Bernard, you've had some similar problems with the school district that hasn't been as willing to adjust, should we say? But I'll leave the lion's share of that for you.
Hi. So we're a general bookstore. We do a lot of school visits and have done for close to 50 years. And over the last couple of years, we have had both the last minute parent complaint, but then last fall in a new wrinkle, we had two authors with a book on book banning. We had done a day of presentations with district schools the day before. We got to our final school on the second day, and we were hustled into a side room and told that they couldn't do the presentation. They could read the book. No one had a problem with the book, but the presentation was not appropriate for the age level, which was K1-2. And I pushed back, and phone calls were made, and I was told that book banning discussions for elementary were inappropriate. And the authors chose to walk rather than just do story time. And then about a week later, the authors went to Book Riot and told their story, and then made their own social media posts, and the district got slammed. And the upshot has been, we can't do stuff without having presentations vetted, and they're being granular and ridiculous. And this is no other district near us is making these kinds of issues. Our private schools aren't, but our home district is gone crazy. And the one in the fall, there was no parent objection. There was an objection from an administrator. And they decided, and it wasn't so much they had an objection on the face of it, it was that they were afraid that parents might object. And so they acted preemptively. This was following Banned Books Week for a book on book banning. So just lovely and ironic and surreal. And so,
Yeah, it's great for fans of irony, and for everyone else, not so much. Thank you both for sharing those stories. Part of the reason I wanted you two in particular to share was just because author visit cancellations have been booming so much, and I've been hearing so many more stories about it. But I think now, unless any of you want to respond to anything that you heard there.
First, I just want to say, it's the preemptive sort of decisions that's the scariest part about all of this, right? It's not, at this point, it's not even the cancellation itself, it's the decision before something even happens. So I completely feel you there, and I am also familiar with the author visit that you're talking about in the school district. So, and I wanted to just speak on what you had mentioned about finding schools with opt-in or opt-out programs. And I had a quick, number one, good on you for getting on the phone with the principal. That is not an easy thing to do. I've tried, and they're very hard to get a hold of. But I did want to ask, is it prevalent in where you live for schools to have those programs for families to participate in?
One thing that we were trying to set up events with Ellen Hopkins in St. Louis because she recently moved to Missouri. And we had a lot of librarians eager and excited and saying how much the kids love Ellen Hopkins. And then as soon as I got to the administrators, okay, well, I couldn't get a yes on this, so we can't do the event. We struggled so much trying to get, I think we ended up with 2 school visits for her over the course of, I think, 2 days. And we were hoping for 4. So we did really struggle because she is a frequently banned author and one of the most in the country, I guess. But that's the type of things that we are seeing from schools, and instead of security. So it's the no, and that's the form of censorship.
Go ahead, Mike.
So to speak to your point, so I actually ended up in a long conversation with our superintendent, and his position, and I think the position that you're sort of working into, there was a Supreme Court case in the last term that basically put schools on notice. The parents have to be able to opt out. And in order to do this, they have to make curriculum public and clear. And our district has chosen, and I think a lot of districts are choosing, is to put a policy in place that parents can opt out. Because events happen during the school day, on school property, with school employees present, they're not curriculum, they're curriculum adjacent. They feel exposed, because we sail in at the last minute with material that they haven't seen, that they haven't vetted. They feel like they can be liable. And maybe they can be, but they're not making that easy to work around or work with.
Yeah, so we can open it up to questions from there, but I'll just say a little bit that the case is Mahmoud versus Taylor, which you probably heard about, mostly, not exclusively, but mostly targeting queer books and particularly queer kids' books. So, and in my view, that case is working as intended, right, by making people scared of liability so that they self-censor. But yeah, let's open it up to questions, and I'll hang back and let you 3 answer first, and then if I have anything to add, I will.
Hi. We have just had our first major school visit cancellation, and it happened after we hosted an author. The next day I get a call from the district, or the theater that we were supposed to host the district at,
that after we hosted someone, the kid went home with the book they got, which was a picture book, and complained, called the principal the next morning. Principal's friends with the admin. Admin made this whole stink. Our connection through the district called me and said, yeah, I was on a meeting all day. Following this event, we're just running into some issues. We're going to have to cancel the next author you have coming. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like that has nothing to do with yesterday's event. And they said the district is pulling funding for the transportation of getting to the event. And they're saying, oh, they just don't have enough bus drivers for that day. And they don't have, she's like, I can't tell you that it's retaliatory. And I'm like, I can tell you it's retaliatory, obviously. These authors have nothing to do with this. But she was like, there's nothing we can do. And it was a large bulk buy of 500 books, with multiple schools being bussed in for this visit, with 3 weeks before the visit. So I'm kind of wondering what are some of maybe ways to take action when schools are starting to have retaliatory secret stuff? Shane, you kind of mentioned this with the electrical issue at one of your offsites. I just am at a loss when the district is kind of being shady shits.
Did you hold them to the committed sale?
No.
Could you have?
I pushed back a little bit, and because they had just done the event the day before, they said the funding was also on hold because it was going towards the transportation and they had to fix the buses. And she rambled off the reasons why they couldn't fix the buses because they had to use the money that the books were for.
Because I think what you kind of said was having those commitments.
Yeah.
And we work a lot with our nonprofit to provide books to underserved kids. So that's where a lot of when we expect a school visit to happen, but then we need to use the nonprofit to provide the books. We have that guaranteed buy-in, but I would have tried to make them commit to buying the next books anyway, and I would have had the author sign and then deliver the books so that something could have happened. That would have been my pivot probably in that situation, and I would have said you have committed to this sale, to this purchase. If you aren't able to bus the students in for the event, that's fine. Here are the books anyway that you have paid for. So that's I would have fought back with my teeth. You want to be snarky? I'm gonna just make you do.
Yeah, we pivoted
something.
to try most of the schools that were being bussed in to move to individual school visits, but that didn't come with the school guaranteed buy from the district. Those schools had to then pivot to whoever we got. Those were covered. So it's still not a total loss, but at least 3 schools were lost.
I will say, I think, as someone who doesn't do school visits, but I think if that was, for instance, an organization and they would say that they don't have buses to transport people or something like that, I would just choose to never work with them again. Because if they don't uphold the same values as the bookstore and what we're trying to do, then fuck them. They are not worth it at all. So I think, and that's also another thing, is getting community organizations involved as much as possible. I think if there are, nonprofits or just small community orgs that are part of the event in some way, there's also more pressure to not, let down multiple groups or organizations. So it's a sneaky way of doing it, but I do think that helps to just show that there is a whole community of people that want these kids to be reading these books and to hear these authors. So why are you ruining it for those kids? So.
And I'll just add that that's tragic. That level of investment that you guys and time and I know that was so much work to get the rug ripped out from underneath you. Definitely having some kind of written documentation and agreement in place beforehand. But I would also say when we've when this has happened to us, and we've heard every sort of excuse under the sun as it relates to logistical issues, right? With which is why we can't host an author, and when in the case when we know that that's not the case, right? And especially if we've sold books already to individuals, to families, and we're kind of sitting in pre-order limbo, like not knowing what quite to do, we will take it upon ourselves to email like each individual person who purchased a book. You can, BCC everyone and just let them know, hey, like this author is not coming anymore. This was not our decision, and just being transparent. Because many of them have questions, right? They pre-ordered this book for this event, or they were looking forward to this event, and it's no longer happening. It wasn't our decision, right? And actually, this is the information that we have. And so we're very, very transparent with customers, especially who have invested also in this event about that. And oftentimes they collectively will put pressure or question whoever our previous partner was. And like Sophia said, we have absolutely had to reevaluate and certain partnerships, right, with venues or with schools that we know are not going to be supportive of us or our authors.
Yeah, I'm not working with them anymore.
Good.
Yeah, this is a slightly different direction, but we sort of think of ourselves as like in a nice liberal bubble just south of San Francisco. But where we've really seen it, for all of our events, we run Facebook ads. And when we hosted Robert Reich and Nancy Pelosi, it was just a full-time job keeping those comments in check because they were very upsetting. And I'm really feeling like the weight in this room with this discussion. And it was really upsetting every day. I was going in, seeing how my Facebook ads were doing. And it was just so horrible, the stuff that was written there. And you can obviously turn off comments. You can totally do that. But then your ad just doesn't work as well. So it's better for you to try and manage the comments rather than just turn them off because it might come to nothing. But I think my question was, like, when this was happening and I was taking on this burden, I didn't really know what to say to the publicist. These are really high-profile authors, the high-profile publicists I'm working with. They just checking in on ticket sales and book sales. And what I was too afraid to tell them, I've got all this horrible stuff going on and all these people making these awful comments. I just wonder with all of you, so what's happened with your relationships with publicists, whether you think they're less likely to send you an author because they're worried about something, or how much do you think we should share? Should we share everything and be really transparent? Or not burden them too much in order to not worry them?
I share everything. I want to be honest with the people I'm working with. I want them to be honest with me. The one time that we really dealt with this very similar situation, we were one of the first stores that removed J.K. Rowling's books from our shelves, and we were trolled literally from all over the world because our social media manager at the time was trans. We did not make her encounter everything. She was still doing her job, so she was still encountering it. But I took over a lot of the responsibility to help shield her a little bit from the entire brunt of the ridiculousness and the hatred that was coming from every country. We were keeping a map of which countries were trolling us. But we blocked, because if we turned off comments on anything that they were attaching themselves to, they were going to other things that were not attached at all. And they were going into those and commenting. We do have a troll that we have tried so hard to remove from everything. We've tried legal action. He emails 4 or 5 times a day sometimes when he is on one. And we have changed our spam filters to where most of because he has targeted myself, our trans staff members, anyone who has a public facing job at the bookstore, he has targeted them. And he sends so many emails, and they are ridiculous, and they are hatred. And even knowing that he is bonkers and that I will never read one of his emails beyond oh God, this is from him again. But it is still so jarring to get that email. So having your staff aware that, yes, this is going on. Yes, what we need to do is block. Yes, most of these people are not from anywhere around us. They've never heard of us before. They've never shopped with us before. They will never shop with us. Block them, put them out of your mind.
I would actually, I don't share everything with the publicist. I don't think they need to know every little complaint or every little bad Instagram comment, especially with like a huge high profile author like that, unless it is, a security concern that the offsite venue or something needs to be aware of. I don't think it's necessary because most likely they've already heard that from other venues, and they're already aware that that is something that they're dealing with. So I think I would personally just not want to add another thing for them to think about on the tour stop. But I mean, it also depends, like with a high profile author like that, or, if it's happening in store, it might be necessary to share that with them. But I think in some cases it's nice to not have to burden another human with the horrible things that are being said. So.
Yeah, and I'll add doing some threat assessment there in terms of when something is obnoxious and harassment and might be doing, psychological damage to someone who might rather shield from it, versus a threat that needs to be reported and needs to be, might require a change in the event. That's an important step to take, and I'm also always happy to help with that if I can. So.
Tom Lowenberg from Octavia Books in New Orleans. I just have a couple of questions, maybe for you or for the room. I'm wondering if there are some other situations where I'd like to hear about where you may have successfully overcome a potential censorship situation. And also any situations where your bookstore may have, because you were willing to host somebody that would have been censored somewhere else, where it actually, turned out to be a bigger success.
I mean, with the author that I mentioned in the beginning, the anti-Zionist Jewish author, it was a hugely successful event, just because so many people showed out in support of the work and for the cause. And I think, the Elliott Bay is very lucky to have worked with a huge amount of wonderful authors in the 50 years that we've been doing events, and it's often been those more, controversial names. But I think that one especially is kind of the perfect example of like, we stood up against the censorship and the protests. And I think a lot of the time the protests are just, they're trying to, bother us and push it forward. Like they were asking us to postpone the event, not necessarily cancel it. So like, just so they can continue protesting. So like, why would we give them more time? So I think just that was one instance of many where we were like, I don't care about your opinion. So we're going to keep doing this. And because we've always done this. So I think that one was the prime example for us.
I can say that I've worked with a store, I won't say too many details because I think they'd prefer me not to, but where an event was threatened with protests that did actually happen, but because the bookselling team communicated with the author's team, both like agents, publicists, the other speaker who was going to be at the event, it ended up being a really, like, maybe one of very few honest to goodness, like, democratic dialogue, people exchanging views and hearing each other. I was like, that's still possible, but it really happened. And it was an incredible event. The authors and the speakers spoke to the protesters, and it might not have been the most like civil moment at all times, but it was better than most of what I've heard. Are you speaking about this?
Are you talking about the Booksmith?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't want to shout. I didn't want to call you out, but okay.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about that.
Hold on.
Yeah, we'll come back to you. No, we're going to stay with you, and we'll come back to the person who's going to get the next question. Thank you for being willing to speak about it. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, so this event was at my store, Brookline Booksmith in Boston, and we had the Slate writer Ayman Ismail for his memoir calling Becoming Baba, and he had a moderator. We have had a lot of people really targeting us for any sort of even vaguely pro-Palestinian authors or views. He, mentions feeling bad for people in Gaza as a fellow Muslim in the book, and they took issue with that. And the moderator had a profile on Canary Mine that these folks also found, and of course took it exactly. It was a doxing website. They took for fact. So they wanted us to cancel the event. So yeah, talked to both the moderator and author, like, what do you want to do? They both wanted to go continue. And yeah, we had some folks protesting outside. It was a group of like maybe 10 people with giant Israeli flag and a giant US flag. And because Ayman is a journalist and has been kind of reporting on this stuff for years, he went outside and talked to them for a really long time. Like, okay, so why are you upset? Like, what is your deal? And he had a friend who's like taking photos and stuff. I actually had to be like, okay, Ayman, we have to start the event now. Like, can you come inside? We also had, we're really lucky to have peace marshals from the JVP there. So we had them just kind of stationed around. And they were familiar with a lot of the protesters too. So that was helpful. Some of the protesters did come into the event. At the beginning, I was like, if you're disruptive, we're kicking you out. Like, there's a peace marshal there, there's one there, there's one there, they will remove you. So for the most part, that was really civil, but it was definitely anxiety inducing. Really fantastic civil dialogue. Ayman wrote a piece about it a few weeks later in Slate. And I have one more thing I want to mention. Because a lot of folks passing by saw the protesters, they were like, why are you protesting this store? I'm going to support them. So we actually had a really great store day. It was a lot, but I think, and Philomena was a huge help to us. So thank you so much for that and for your continued help. You're a queen.
The look Ray just gave me when you said. All right, so this is going to be the last question, and then we'll wrap up. But I'm going to hang out for a little afterwards too. Panelists, you're free to, or if you need to bounce, that's great too. But last question.
I might be ending us on a kind of spicy one, so I apologize in advance. But all the talk today has been about external pressures, and I'm wondering if any of you have ever faced pressure from like upper management or ownership within your own stores during the planning process of an event, either due to kind of preemptive fears of protests, as people were discussing in other situations, or due to genuine ideological disagreement. And if so, if you have any advice for dealing with that.
Yes.
Or just not answer the question if that's best
I also
for
want to
everybody.
say with appreciation and respect for the question, you don't have to go there if it's not comfortable, but if anyone feels like they can, go for it.
I'm a political person. I stay on top of a lot of shit. I'm not always on top of everything. I don't know what every single person believes, and I have set up events with people who I'm like, oh, no. Like, what have I done? And like, it's always brought to me by like a staff member's attention, because we're all very political people. And they're like, why are we doing an event with this dick bag? And I'm like, oh, God, I really should watch my mouth. This is being recorded.
Shane, I don't think anyone's going to be too surprised, but
good. And like, I have to be like, okay, so there's this reason why we're doing the event. You absolutely do not need to work this event. I'm probably going to be the one ending up working this event. It's my fault we're doing the event. I'm going to do it. And we do a lot of partnered events too, where like sometimes it's just literally like, here are the, I'll just say poets, because they're not the ones that are causing the offense. So they'll give me a list of like who's coming, and like I'll just put them on our calendar and we'll order the books and then we'll help promote. But another partner I want to talk about, sometimes I don't look into like what everything is, and I mean, there was one recently where they asked me and I was like, oh, no, absolutely not. Like, not only would I be upset if we were at this event, but my entire staff would revolt. Yeah, like I come to some sort of like mutual understanding of like, this is why I did agree to do the event. And if I don't have a good reason as to why I chose to do the event, like maybe we could actually talk about like not doing the event. Like, because especially depending on when that discovery's happened, then yeah, we can talk about like, hey, this person really does not match our values. What can we do?
I will quickly say yes. When I got the job, I was very upfront and it was like, by the way, I am a political person and I can't change that. Also, we live in a world where we have to be political because books are inherently political. And there are authors that I've wanted to say no to, and then management has been like, we should probably say yes. And it's not, horrible, egregious people, but just slightly differing opinions. But at the heart of it, I think the events we want to host, especially in store, are the ones that reflect the values of the staff members and what our booksellers stand for, because that is what our community stands for. So I think, yes, we've had, some backlash from various booksellers or management or whoever, but at the heart of it, like, you should be doing what all of you want to do. And I will continue to say no to things if I think that person is a dick bag, as you said.
Thanks, gang. I wanna so I'm so delighted that you all were able to join me for this panel, and thank you to you and the folks in the audience who shared your experiences. I want to quickly plug a couple of things that I hope can be helpful going forward. One, we have a new toolkit that we're soft launching here. You're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the coming weeks on all of our channels. This is a set of checklists about navigating harassment, threats, intimidation, including author events, and also including some of the online harassment that we were talking about. Some of it is resources you've had access to before, some of it is new stuff, and it's organized as preparedness checklists that you can actually just go down and say like, okay, here's maybe what we should spend some time working on. So check that out. Keep an eye on our it's available now in full, but you'll be reminded of it on some of our other channels. And I also want to say that I think, especially this last question about kind of navigating internal tensions, I'm going to kind of just plug the earlier session that I did today on bookstore policies and free expression, because I think in working through that kind of policy and in working, training new team members on it and stuff, I think that's where you can bring out a lot of these questions and actually kind of talk through them in advance when blood pressures are comparatively low. So with those plugs, I will just say thank you so much to my panelists here. I really appreciate all of you.
I forgot that I wanted to add, we have gotten publishers to pay for security. I know that was maybe stated in another panel. So ask.
Yeah.
If they are requiring you to have security in an event, ask them to pay for it.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!